Ag PhD full episodes and more are now available on Acres TV, the newest ag platform connecting you to fields of information. Look for us on watchacrestv.com.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk a little about something that seems to worry every farmer out there, ourselves included. It's drying grain.
All right, now if you have never raised a crop, you may be thinking, wait a second, you have to dry the grain after you harvest it? Why don't you just leave it in the field? Won't it dry down on its own as those plants look like they're dying out there? The seed should just dry down if you leave it long enough. Well, it can, but it doesn't always work like that.
Right, because sometimes what happens here where we farm in the northern United States is winter sets in a little too soon. When the temperature goes down, then the drying pretty much stops, or natural drying out in the field. So then it's the choice of, all right, are we going to let that grain sit in the field all the way till spring and take our chances that it'll still be there? Or do we want to harvest it right now and put some heat or air to it?
Well, that leads to another choice for farmers of what moisture percentage do I want to harvest at? Let's take corn, for example. When it reaches full maturity, it's still 35 or 40% moisture, and the kernels are just a little too soft. It just doesn't come off the cob very well. It's tough to harvest then. But as that corn gets down to, say, 25% moisture, you can actually get it combined. And so farmers start to think, all right, at 25%, I've got to get 10% out of that, or get it down to 15% moisture in order to store it. I don't know, that's going to be kind of expensive. So then farmers start playing that numbers game of, do I want to get it at 25%? Maybe I can leave it another week or two and get it down to 20 or even less.
Okay, so Darren said get it down to 15% to store it. What we're looking at here is two different things. First, what moisture do we need to store it in a grain bin safely without it spoiling? Second, what moisture will a grain elevator or terminal take that grain without giving us what they call a dock? So I can haul in 18% moisture corn to an ethanol plant or a grain elevator, but they're going to dock me because the moisture is higher than what their standard is that they want to bring it in at, so they will charge me a certain price. If I don't want to pay that price, that's the reason why I have to get the moisture down.
Now, the good thing with corn is if you do bring it into the bin and it's a little bit too wet, you can run air through it, or you can run heated air through it, run a dryer, and speed that process up of taking moisture out of the grain. That's nice, but not every crop is like that. Let's take soybeans, for example. If soybeans come into the bin a little bit too wet, it's a little bit more challenging, especially with heat, to try to take that moisture out. So many farmers that do have beans that are a little bit wet, they may try to use a bin fan control system to try to just run air through on days where the humidity is just right and those kinds of things. So okay, it can be done, but it's a little more challenging.
Okay, we're getting into the weeds here, but let me just say, Darren mentioned bin fan control. What that means is you got a sensor on your grain bin fan that will determine what's the temperature and what's the humidity. If we have a higher temperature and a lower humidity, then you can take moisture out of grain. If you have a high humidity and maybe a little bit lower temperature, you could actually pump in moisture into that grain, and that's perfectly legal. You can't spray water on grain to make it wetter. That's not legal, but you can push air in through it that's very humid, and now you can add moisture into that grain. So you can either take it away or you can add it by using these bin fan controls.
Well, we got a little bit complicated here, but when you look at grain bins and you watch farmers at harvest time, as they're bringing grain into those bins, they're shooting for a moisture percentage that's going to be safer for storage for long term, but they're also thinking about, hey, I might have to take a little bit of excess moisture out of this grain, either with just air or with heated air.
And then the big thing they're thinking about is, how much am I going to spend to store this crop or to have to bring it to town? So it's always something that farmers are looking at, is the economic side of this business as well.
And speaking of spending money, one thing farmers will spend money on is controlling our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop it coming up later in the show.